Welcome to the What If podcast. We're sharing an ever-growing collection of stories from the Belmont entrepreneur community to inspire you to start and keep going. I'm your host, Elizabeth Gortmaker. Here we go. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Elizabeth.
It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me here.
We are so happy to have you on the podcast today. Let's just dive right in. When did you graduate from Belmont and what did you study?
Yeah, so I graduated in 2015 with my master's in accountancy. And I got my undergrad before that. I went straight from my undergrad into my graduate program.
I love alums like you because you were an accountant and you're making biscuits.
I am making biscuits.
I love these stories.
Yeah. I went to culinary school in my late 20s and then decided to finish the degree I had started, but really have a passion for the restaurant industry. So I'm excited to use my business degree, and truthfully, every restaurant needs a good accountant. So
Yes, absolutely. Well, Biscuit Love, tell us about your business. What is your what if that, one day you thought, what if I do this, but first tell us, what is Biscuit Love?
yeah, so Biscuit Love is a brunch restaurant founded here in Nashville, Tennessee. We started in a food truck in 2012, so we're celebrating our 10th birthday in May this year, and opened our first bricks and mortar in 2015. And we now have 3 locations in Nashville and surrounding areas, with 2 on the way. So expecting 2 more biscuits coming along. And gosh, my what if was, what if we pursued something we loved doing versus doing what we thought we were supposed to do? So, and that really started, I think, in my late 20s when I went to culinary school. I had studied accounting, didn't finish my degree program, but had been doing accounting for small businesses, and sort of woke up one morning. I was on a trip with my entire family in Europe, and I thought, why is their life so different here? These people seem to be just living differently than we do. And I really fell in love with the community that's formed over food. So decided to go to culinary school. And it was sort of a defining moment for me, for sure.
Why biscuits? Is it a family recipe? Is it your favorite food? Is it what you grew up eating?
Yeah. Well, we joke about this being the dirty little secret of Biscuit Love all the time, but I'm about to bust it out, I guess. So I actually grew up in the Northeast, so I didn't grow up eating biscuits. The only biscuits I ever had were what my husband lovingly refers to as womp biscuits, and it's because that's the sound the can makes when you pop it open. But my husband grew up in East Tennessee and grew up eating biscuits every day. Special biscuits on Sunday, but everyday biscuits every other morning. And truly, we were batting around an idea for a food truck, and he asked me in sort of a moment of frustration, what's your favorite thing that I cook? And I said, your biscuits. And then that's sort of how it was born.
Tell me a little bit about the process of developing the idea for your business, but really launching the business. So many people have ideas, but it's hard to implement the plan.
Yeah, so I think I just said I graduated in 2015, which means in 2012 I was doing my undergrad. Our daughter was 18 months old, and so like any good business student, I thought we need to write a business plan. And like so many things with Biscuit Love, there's God stories interwoven through them everywhere. But I think probably one of the most definitive moments was we had come up with this idea of biscuits. We had sort of outlined what our menu was going to look like, and I reached out to a friend who I had gone to college with in my early 20s, who was a hostess at another restaurant in town, Red Pony, which is in downtown Franklin. And they had a food truck that they used for catering events. And so I said, as part of our business plan, we should sit down with Jason McConnell and figure out how expensive it's going to be to build out a food truck, because he's built one, so he knows how much it costs. And so he very generously agreed to give us 15 minutes of his time to have a conversation for, his hostess, his friend, who also happens to be his director of operations now. So she's been with the company for a long time. But anyways, at the end of the meeting, Carl left for a meeting that was supposed to take 15 minutes, came back 2 hours later with keys to a food truck, having been added to insurance. And he starts telling me this story about how Jason said the best way to test the business model was to just do it. And he let us borrow the food truck for, it was 18 months for free, and gave us a commissary to use, and just was incredibly generous. I mean, it's the most absurd story, who lets someone borrow their food truck, but that's absolutely what happened. And that's how Biscuit Love was launched. I looked at Carl and I said, how much is this going to cost us? Because here I am, the accountant, right? And he said, I have no idea. And I was like, okay. So that's kind of how Biscuit Love started. And we really spent a lot of time thinking about how we could bridge the gap between brunch and dinner, because at the time food trucks were really mostly operating in the dinner time space, doing beer festivals, doing music concerts, those types of things. So built a menu that we thought could bridge the whole day. So, and we launched May 1st of 2012. We were outside Bridgestone Arena. I told Carl, I said, you have to sell 87 biscuits tonight in order for us to have the amount of money we had in our bank account before we went shopping. Because at the time, I think we had $43 left. It's one of those origin stories of the $43. And I think he sold 25. So not the roving success we were hoping for on our first night out. But we had a really great second night out, and God's just continued to provide since day one. So we're really thankful. And the Nashville community obviously also has been incredibly supportive.
So you and Carl were young, and you had a very young daughter.
We did.
You're going out on this limb with something that was new to both of you.
Yeah.
In a new industry, in a new world, and something new to the market, brand new to Nashville. Every entrepreneur, it seems, has that person that helps them have the guts to go for it. It sounds like Jason might have been one of those people for you from the get-go.
He was. He's been such a gift, and he's still involved in the business today. So we're thankful for him.
Where do you guys find that grit and the guts to go out there? I mean, I could see there's a million reasons why you shouldn't have done what you did. One easy one would be you had a small child at the time, but yet because you made such a jump, here you are 10 years later, and everything you've been able to accomplish in those 10 years, but everything you've been able to offer for all of your employees as well. What a huge impact that has had, that you probably would not have had you chosen a, quote, safer route.
Probably not.
Talk to me a little bit about the guts and kind of what put that fire in your belly and what kept you guys going, even when all external signs would say, ooh, this might be too tricky.
Yeah, I think, a lot of things. I think in the beginning, Carl was working a job that he was really unhappy in, and I knew we needed to make a change as a family. Neither of us had sort of disrupted our late 20s, early 30s to come back and work jobs we hated. And so we were, and we had chosen the jobs that were giving us health insurance and all the traditional safety nets. So I think, the first jump was really just saying we're going to leave the stability of that job and do this thing. I wouldn't say it was exactly how we planned it. We sort of planned on launching on the weekends, and he was going to keep his Monday through Friday. But for a lot of circumstances, that just didn't work. And we had to make a choice. And I figured if there was ever a moment to do it, it was that moment. Carl and I are really lucky. We have an incredible family and a lot of safety nets. So I knew we weren't going to be on the street corner, which helped a lot. But I think truly entrepreneurs cannot be risk averse. I mean, you sort of have to put yourself out there in a different way. And it's funny because I think if someone had asked me before I launched Biscuit Love if I was entrepreneurial, I probably wouldn't have said yes. But a friend of mine from elementary school, and this is so weird because Facebook's so weird, and you talk to people that you would never talk to, but she reminded me that in 5th grade, I, along with two other girls, both named Sarah, started a business in our elementary school where we were washing like erasers and chalkboards for teachers. And she's like, and what's funny is all three of us Sarahs now have our own business. So it was called, Triple S Cleaning Services or something. And I think it's really funny because there was something deep in my belly, even way back then, that was sort of just like wanted to do my own thing. And my mom jokes all the time. She's like, I could have told you what all my kids were going to be when they grew up. And she tells the story about, Tommy always loved Legos. And so I knew he was going to be an engineer. And Bobby just like pursued the Lord in a totally different way. And he's an Episcopal priest. And my sister was an artist and she's a graphic designer. And she's like, and Sarah, I just always knew she wasn't going to work for anybody else. That was what she always said. So
Mom always know.
I know.
Mom always knows.
She's like, I didn't know what she was going to do, but I knew she wasn't going to work for anybody else. So, but yeah, so I think like you have to have like a little bit of grit to just jump and then really have the grit to push it forward, because there were so many times when it would have been a lot easier to close up shop and choose something way more secure or whatever. But we just, God continued to bless us over and over and over again. And we just had confirmation after confirmation of like, this is my business. Let me bless it. Just continue to be obedient. And that's sort of was Carl's in my mindset the whole time, Yeah.
I mean, I know you guys are foodies, and obviously it's about such quality and delicious food, and all that brings to the table and bringing people together. But I know Biscuit Love is about so much more than just such delicious food. Um, there's such a deeper purpose there, and I know that's where a lot of the impact and the value and the relationships you have with your employees comes from, which can be a lot of what spurs us forward, even in the difficult moments. So we know rewarding work is the most, when your purpose is aligned with your values, it's the most rewarding.
Absolutely.
And I would love for you to speak a little bit more about the purpose and the values of Biscuit Love with
Yeah.
regards to maybe your customers, but specifically your culture and your company and your team.
Yeah. So, like I said, Biscuit Love, Carl and I were in our 30s when we really sort of entered the restaurant space in like a true way. And we just knew we wanted something different. We wanted to create a culture that was different than the places we had experienced or the stories that we had heard. I mean, the restaurant industry is sort of notorious for being a bit of a pirate ship. And, you have all these people from all different walks of life coming together, and typically it's just not great a great workspace. It's long hours, it's hot, it's loud, it's fast, it's all the things that you would say like doesn't really align with like peace or zen or any of those things. And so when like we had all these ideas of how we were going to set Biscuit Love apart. We were going to give YMCA memberships and we were going to promote healthy, active lifestyles and all of those things. But we started really and set out by trying to create community around the table, because that's what Carl and I knew. So when we first opened, we were eating with each of our employees sort of one-on-one to get to know them a little bit better. And I sat down with this dishwasher. His name was Frederick. It's sort of one of those sort of stories that sticks with me still to this day. And it was his turn to sit down, and he ordered his lunch, and we sat down, and he thought it was like so weird that he was sitting down with me. He was just like really awkward and uncomfortable. And I was like, well, tell me about your story. Like, tell me about yourself. And he started telling me his resume. So he started listing out like all the other places he had worked, like where he was a dishwasher before he came to Biscuit Love and all this stuff. And I said, like, Frederick, I don't care about any of that. Like, just tell me about your mom and them. And he looked at me and he said, can I be honest with you? And I was like, of course. And he said, Sarah, I've never worked at a place where the owner of the company knew my name, let alone cared about my story. And it was one of those moments where it like shook me to my core, just in this moment of like, I hadn't operated in a lot of spaces where people didn't know my name, and I hadn't spent very much of my life being anonymous, um, but I called Carl and I said, Carl, like, we have to reframe everything that we're thinking about and everything that we're doing, because like these people aren't even used to a culture of belonging. And, that's what we need to create. And so that's what we just sort of, decided to try to be. And, like really get to know our employees, really meet them where they're at, try to supply their basic needs through fair wages and, living wages. But then also like try to meet their emotional and spiritual needs as well, which is, how our staff care program was formed. So we have two therapists on staff that are employed by the company, who are available to our team members. And they do like a ton of life coaching. We have a benevolence fund that's there for those situations where when you're living paycheck to paycheck, a flat tire can really, really, really put a hurt on your finances. And so finding ways and strategies to help them through sort of unexpected things. Started celebrating births and started grieving deaths, and and just doing life with people.
That's incredible. I mean, I think of some of the best large corporations and the best corporate jobs and the perks that they offer. Um, you don't get things like that at a restaurant. It's just such a interesting model to care so much about the people. And at the end of the day, it's the people and not just the customers, but your team, because that's where your success comes from.
Well, and the truth is, I say all the time, like Carl and I are not the ones serving biscuits um, to our guests anymore. And if we want to be different in the hospitality space, like we need to show hospitality to our employees first, or they're never going to know how to model that for our guests. And I think, you know, um, our mission statement is to nourish the souls of everyone we touch, but nourish them not only physically but nourish them like emotionally as well. And I think that's our guests, but more importantly that's our staff, and like it enables them to be able to do that as well. And I think to your point earlier, you know what ended up happening was our mission collided with our our work, and that is what keeps us going now. And that's what excites us now is, taking this model of like what everyone told me wouldn't work. It's never going to work to pay people this way. It's never going to work to be able to afford to hire therapists. It's never going to work. I mean, I had so many people saying like, this isn't going to work. And then to see a business that's not only surviving, but is thriving on top of that, it's a model I'm excited to share with people. And that now is like one of the things that really excites me is being able to share that model with other restaurateurs to say, you can do it differently. You can walk this out differently. You're going to save money, not retraining and training and training and training and training employees because the turnover rate's so high in our industry, and I think, it's just been really exciting, and truly the work that I get to do with our staff members is just an honor. It's really an honor. So
Yeah, I know there's a lot of hierarchy in the restaurant industry, with regards to like the dishwashers, and what an amazing thing that you would sit down and know his name and just the dignity that gives to him and how much he'll be more brought into Biscuit Love. It's more than just a job, it's friendships. Talk a little bit about the business model and how you guys have kind of changed the process of it's not a typical restaurant business model with regards to pay or tip or you mentioned the two therapists. I know you have two so that one can be primarily Spanish speaking so that
yeah.
that can be accessible to all employees. But I would love to hear a little bit more about your business model and how you organize pay and benefits and all of that for the different levels of employees.
Yeah, I mean, so really, I think one of the things that we tried to buck right from the beginning was this idea of like the front of house and the back of house. And like, one is more valuable than the other. And that's sort of traditional restaurant culture. Um, that like, oh, you're a server and you're making all the tips and you walk home with all the tips at the end of the day. And then all your back of house folks are working for $10 an hour or whatever they're making, if that. And, so sort of like debunking the idea that, if you're the person who's washing the dishes, that your work is less valuable to the customer because you don't talk to the customer. The reality is we would not have the ability to serve food for anybody if someone wasn't washing the dishes. And so we really tried to reframe that idea of back of house versus front of house culture and said, like, we're one team operating for the delight of the guest. And really, like, all of our back of house employees go through some front of house shifts and they're trained to do some front of house duties. And all of our front of house employees are trained on back of house duty, shifts as well. And really just say, like, we're not going to value one position over another differently in regards to the tips. And so we started a house-wide tip share, and all of our employees are empowered to interact with the guests and to serve the guests and to take orders if they need to, and all of those things. And what it's allowed us to do is, like, really create some equity within the business, as far as front of house and back of house is concerned. And then, the other piece of that is, like, really having published wage documents so that there's no sort of mystery around how people are getting paid, or, and giving people roads to advancement, which is exactly what we call them, which is a pathway to growth. Like, how do you make more money? How do we reward longevity with the business? I mean, I'm so fortunate. Biscuit Love is going to celebrate. Well, it did celebrate in January. The first brick and mortar location's been open for 7 years, and we have 14 employees that celebrate 7 years with us this year. So, and I still have two of my very first employees are both still working for us. So, and we've been so fortunate, like, creating a model where, it's a healthy workplace. People are kind. We're intentional in how we talk and communicate and share feedback. We train people how to do that. We don't just say we value it and then not teach anybody how to do it, because communication is difficult. And and the reward that we've reaped as a business owner is, we have amazing retention rates. So we're really lucky. And like you said earlier, like, I don't I don't serve. I mean, you didn't say this, but I don't serve the guests anymore. My staff is the people who are doing the interacting, and they're truly the ones that are making the business turn every day. That's not me anymore. So it was me at one point, but it's not anymore.
I'd love to hear how you define and then measure success.
Mm. So I
Big
think,
question.
yeah, no, that was a good one. I think for us, Carl and I think one thing that just to set us apart as a couple and as entrepreneurs is that we really sit in a growth mindset. We're always reading books, we're always trying to grow. And so even within Biscuit Love, as we started examining, like, traditional, like, review processes or things like that, I was like, this is all great, but, like, really how people become more valuable as they're growing as a person. You know what I mean? Because, if we're not growing, well, as Carl always says, if we're not growing, we're dying. There's not many things in nature that just grow and stop. They usually grow and then die. And so, being really focused on continuing to grow. And that's not just, like, in my skill set at work. That's how am I growing emotionally? How am I growing as a parent? How am I growing as a spouse? How am I growing as a leader? And so I think success for me really is defined on, like, am I growing? And then who around me am I growing? Because I think really good leaders are growing lots of leaders around them and are passing that knowledge on, not holding it all for themselves. Um, so even in our review process, we actually don't have formal reviews. We have growth plans. And so, and those are professional and personal growth plans. And really that's what we're measuring as success for our leaders within the company. And that has a lot to do with mentorship and being mentored. And so I think for me, so yeah, that was a long answer for how do I measure it, but that's how I measure it.
Yeah. I'm just reminded of, we love because he first loved us,
Oh,
and we give because we've received so much. We have such an abundance. And, the beauty of someone like Jason at the very, very beginning of Biscuit Love, and how his openness to you guys and generosity and encouragement is really what helped spur what's grown into such a large thing. But that you didn't just receive that, you then turned around, and as you grew and your opportunity grew, you kept such a mindset of giving and generosity.
We've tried to. I mean, it's interesting because it's just like when I tell the Biscuit Love story and when you like hear the whole thing, and it's like, if it there's like 100 of these stories, but like there were just so many moments of God's extravagant generosity. And like, we're so lucky to serve a God that loves us that way. But then to see other humans doing that for people is just a really, really special thing. And I mean, the story about Jason, first of all, there's 100 stories about Jason himself, but it's like, there's just story after story after story where people just showed up in our lives and blessed us and blessed our business. And truthfully, like it's my like privilege to do that. But like, I also feel like it's my duty to pass that on.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. Well, looking back at the last 2 years specifically, there was a little thing that happened in the world. Uh,
Yeah,
we're all so over, but it's there.
it is.
I know, and COVID has just been devastating, and policy around COVID was devastating for small businesses and for the restaurant industry specifically.
Yeah.
I believe maybe 50% of the restaurants in Nashville closed and will not reopen. Correct me if you know something different, but let's tap into that a little bit because you are a restaurant owner. What happened? How did you navigate this the last 2 years? What is your pandemic story with Biscuit Love?
Yeah. I mean, the pandemic, I think for everybody, um, gosh, I mean, it was so disruptive and also so restorative in so many ways. So, I think you have to look at both sides of all the coins equally. But yeah, I mean, so March of 2020 is rolling along. We were having our best year ever at Biscuit Love. And, we started hearing rumblings, but I think, especially here in Nashville, we were pretty like not blinders on, but we just weren't seeing it coming close to affecting us anytime soon. And Carl and I actually left for spring break, and we were in Chicago with our daughter. And the city, Chicago, shut down around us while we were there that weekend. And I said, babe, like, I got to get home. Like, I need to get home to Nashville to figure out what's going on. And I landed back in Nashville that Monday. And truthfully, like, we had a great day. Like, it was really busy. The tourists were out. And I think, that week we were running as hard and fast as we'd ever been. And it was like hitting a brick wall. I mean, I remember Wednesday, it was like, oh, there's no customers. And then Wednesday is when really like all the mandates in Nashville sort of hit. Yeah, and it was really difficult. Like up until that point, Biscuit Love had no to-go program. The only way to get to-go food at Biscuit Love was to stand in line and order it, and then we would box it up for you to go. But we didn't have online ordering. We didn't have third parties, and basically our dining rooms got shut down. So, we pivoted to a to-go model pretty quickly. I think COVID was all about pivoting as much as possible and, refining your model. And I think the people that who ended up thriving through the pandemic were the people who were able to do that quickly and not be afraid to make some changes. And Carl and I laugh all the time because we're like, we're food truckers. Like if there's not a group of people hustling more than food truckers, I don't know who they are. So we've got a lot of grit. And so we were trying to make it work as much as we could with reduced capacity. And then we had to make like the very, very difficult decision to lay off our staff, the majority of our staff, and then ask the people who remained to take massive pay cuts because our revenue literally was decreased by 90% essentially overnight. And, I jokingly say if I ever write a book, my first chapter is going to be on the day I had to lay off my staff because speaking of, extravagant generosity. That day was such a display of it. I made the decision to call my whole staff together and to be the person that had one-on-one conversations with every staff member. It was about 90 people at the time. Um, and really one-on-one talk to each of them and let them know if they were going to be able to keep their job or not keep their job. And I would say 85% of the 90 people didn't keep their job. So, um, and I told everybody, I said, this has been God's business from the beginning. If it's meant to survive, it's going to survive, but I need to make the financial decisions to like make sure we have something to come back to. And it was so difficult, but my team just blessed me over and over and over again that day. I mean, so many stories of people sitting down with me, like, don't say a word. I'm fine leaving. Or if I'm on that list to stay, will you take me off the list and will you put so and so on the list because he has 3 kids and I'm going to be fine. I can move home with my mom. And people offering to work for free and people, just, I mean, saying, Sarah, like, we know your heart. We know you would never do this if you didn't have to. And like, we trust you and we're going to be back. Um, and truthfully, like, just like blessed over and over and over again by that culture, because it was like, the truth is like culture's soil. So like Carl and I were able to sort of decide what we wanted the soil to look like, but Carl and I aren't the ones feeding that soil anymore. It's so many other people other than us. And we really got to see the fruits of that day. It was just such a display of humility and grace and mercy and kindness and generosity from all of my staff. And it was a really difficult day. And I remember going home and I was just sad. I was really sad. And then I just was like, also at the same time, like thanking Jesus for like, that's what I always wanted. Like, that's the place I wanted to create, was a place where in the midst of hard things, we can still love each other well. And yeah, we laid off our staff. Fortunately, we were able to get PPP funds. And as soon as we did, we hired as many people as would come back. We were able to retain 80% of our pre-COVID staff through COVID. So that was amazing. Everyone came back to work and, we did what we could to break even or as close to break even as we could, and just patiently waited for what we didn't know how long it was going to last, but we made some really good pivots during COVID. Like, we made some decisions as a business that I think will make us stronger moving forward. And I can confidently say, like, we're a better business on the backside of this COVID adventure that we're all still on than we were going into it. So,
wow. It's just a beautiful story. And just thinking about your leadership and the humility and what that's done with the company culture. And you're right. I love that analogy of the soil, and that now it's this whole ecosystem, and it's not just you and Carl at the center, but you've been able to have your hands in developing something that can thrive without
us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, thriving, without you, in a sense, I know you're expanding. Did you say you're expanding out of state to another state, out of Tennessee?
We are. So we have 2 more locations coming on. One is going to be here in the Nashville area, but the second is in Birmingham, Alabama. So it will be our first out of state venture, which we're really excited about.
How do you manage, because you and Carl can't be there every day. So how are you working towards maintaining the same culture, the same Biscuit Love, but in a different state?
I mean, truthfully, it all comes down to the people. So really identifying an operating partner that's going to operate the business down there in Birmingham, I think was the key. Like, that was what unlocked the door for us to go to Birmingham, was really finding the right person. Because you have to have someone who understands that, like, what we do is bigger than biscuits or eggs or bacon, and like really understand that, like, there's decisions we make as a company that put the people over the profits, and like, you need to have someone committed to that or the soil won't work. And I think it's just about having like the right people in place and then the right team to help go support, building that culture in the beginning. It's going to have been, gosh, 2000, so it's going to be 4 years since we opened our last store. So I think we have some people chomping at the bit. They're excited to take that on. But yeah, I think it's just going to be a lot of dedication to like continuing to do the right thing. And, you know, it's just always trying to make the next right choice.
As you look back over the last 10 years, what has surprised you in a good way that's been easier than you expected? And on the flip side, what has been harder than you expected?
Let's see, what's been easier? I think finding really amazing team members has actually been easier than I thought it was going to be. I think focusing on the person first and the skill set second has been really advantageous for us. We've been so fortunate to like really build a great team. Um, and truthfully, like me, I'm just like real type A and like to be in control of all the things. So like finding those people who I really trust to sort of like hand stuff off to has been much easier than I expected it to be. Let's see what's been harder. I think I assume that everyone, or I assumed, I don't anymore. I think I assumed that everyone had the same privileges that I had growing up. So I think one of the lessons we learned really early on was that like everyone's coming to the table with really different experiences and like making sure we're educating people to be able to be part of a community because like I thought like I'm going to create this family and everyone's going to love this and then like all these people that hate their families come in and they're like I don't want anything that looks like a family because I don't know what family is supposed to look like. And I think like reframing community for people and like really being intentional about meeting people where they are and like letting them safely find their way into that. Yeah, I mean, that's been harder.
All right. I like to end these interviews with a big question. What advice do you have for young entrepreneurs who are just starting out on their journey and they're finding their footing and they're starting to get their idea off the ground? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think for me, like when people ask me or say I'm about to do this thing, like my first question to them is like, do you really love it? Are you really passionate about whatever you're doing? Because the truth is this is hard. You know what I mean? It's just as hard today with 3 stores that I don't really run anymore. I have all these people that are doing all these things as it was when it was just Carl and I on the food truck. It's a different hard, but it's hard. It's a lot of responsibility and and you have to love it. You really, really have to love it and be passionate about your mission. And to your point earlier, like really having a why attached to what you're doing. Because when it's dark and when COVID hits, or, you know, all your employees call out or whatever happens, you have to really love it to say, okay, I'm going to go make the biscuits today. Yeah. And I think so, like being passionate and then just like be unabashedly like gritty when it comes to pushing it because it's important that you do it and people gravitate towards that passion.
Definitely. Hey, I want to give our weekly shout out to a young entrepreneur. This week's shout out is going to go to Clementine Floral Design Company, started by Savannah Taylor, who actually just placed second place in our business plan competition. Clementine is a passion project for her. She grew up with flowers and floral design, and now she's launched her business. She's a few years in, and she creates high impact floral design for weddings or for events. I do have some up here on my shelf
They're
today,
so
and
beautiful.
they are so beautiful. And again, that's Savannah Taylor. We love you, girl. Sarah, before I let you go, we've got some
Okay,
rapid fire questions.
sounds
Are you
fun.
ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Pancakes or waffles?
Ooh, French toast.
Ooh, nice. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Yeah. If you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Portland, Maine.
Oh, I've never been there, and it's on my
Really.
list.
It's so great.
Where are you from?
I grew up in northeastern Pennsylvania.
Okay, I remember you said you grew up in the Northeast. Okay, we lost our speed. Here we go. Favorite food?
Macaroni and cheese.
Okay, what's the weirdest thing you have ever eaten?
Oh man, I had Jenny's everything bagel ice cream the other day, and it was delicious, but it is weird.
Is it like the salty sweet thing?
It's hard to explain. Like Carl could not understand why I kept eating it.
Did he like it?
No, not even a little bit.
Okay. I don't think I'm gonna go there. What's your favorite song?
Oh man, I'm a big fan of Alanis Morissette and her Jagged Little Pill album.
Yes, 90s girl.
Oh, way dated myself on that one.
Sarah, describe yourself in 5 words.
Oh gosh.
I know these are hard. These might be a little bit hard right now.
No, that's okay. Let's see. I'm pretty fierce in how I love people. I would say I'm really direct. My girl is always telling me, Gertie, she's like, you're just so strong. So I think that's probably one of them. Compassionate and generous.
Yes. Where will we find you in 5 years?
Ooh, well, hopefully I'll be sort of planning my next steps outside of Biscuit Love. I've really had the opportunity to start sitting on some nonprofit boards, and that's been really exciting for me. So figuring out what that next step for me is.
Sarah, thank you so much for being here today. We just love your story.
Elizabeth, It's been so fun.
It's been fun. Thank you for sharing your story. And I just, on behalf of all of Belmont, we just love you and we are so proud of you. And we're grateful for your generosity to come back and to guide and encourage our students and future entrepreneurs. But keep up the great work.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Thanks for listening. What If is produced by Old Soul. For links and show notes, please visit belmontetp.com/whatif. Until next time, keep asking what if.